we begin an in-depth discussion with opinion leaders from around the world. The continued spread of COVID-19 is expected to hurt economic growth in many countries. On Arirang News, we've previously discussed the impact on tourism and aviation, but today we talk about the sharing economy. Now, sharing platforms have become an integral part of the modern economy and lifestyle, especially in countries like the US, where consumers share their possessions, home spaces, cars, and even experiences. Huge platforms like Uber and Airbnb facilitate this peer-to-peer consumer trend. But the concept of sharing and communal activities is something that is being discouraged and avoided with the COVID-19 outbreak, as we are advised to maintain social distancing. But what does this mean for platform workers and the sharing economy? For more, we connect with Dr. Jeremy Kaplan, Editor-in-Chief of Digital Trends, joining us from New York. We also have on the panel Dr. Kim Byung-ju, Affiliate Professor at Hankuk University of Foreign Studies in Seoul. Well, my first question goes to you, Dr. Kaplan. What kind of services are the most affected by this COVID-19 outbreak? And which US companies are the most worried right now?
No, doctor, I'm just a Jeremy, but thank you, I appreciate that. Yes, you're right, it's easy to look at the travel industry and worry about the impact on airlines, on cruise lines. Of course, that's going to be a real challenge. But you're right, the sharing economy, which is in a lot of ways very nascent as an industry, still trying to get its legs underneath it, is facing a really serious challenge here. Airbnb, for example, seeing some real serious issues. People aren't willing to rent somebody else's house at this exact moment. We've also become very much a delivery economy these days, and that's delivery of everything from your clean laundry to your groceries to tonight's meals. And consumers are very concerned about the potential for that being a risky delivery mechanism for these types of for the coronavirus itself. So we're seeing a lot of reluctance to rely upon those services, and a lot of people that are very reluctant to start looking at new ones and investing in new services when there are these concerns that linger around, the everyday life.
Right, and we've also seen many IT events cancelled as well, all these companies and workers working from home, I suppose. Well, Dr. Kim, these platform companies have workers and operations across many countries. Airbnb in Beijing, for instance, has suspended its services until May. Which countries do you think will be the hardest hit by social distancing?
Yeah, I guess the intuitive answer to that question would be those industries that you mentioned you have already covered, those countries that have heavy reliance on tourism, I suppose. You mentioned aviation as well, so overall hospitality business. But those countries that rely upon receiving as many as possible tourists coming into their countries. Italy, I guess, is quite interesting that it's on the top of the list of the countries that are suffering from this case this time, and makes perfect sense. And we heard the news that they're kind of like freezing the movement of people altogether. And so what we see is these countries in Europe, Asia, it began with, it started with the Asian countries, but it's spreading to Europe here as well. In terms of social distancing as a whole, it is going to affect, and we are seeing already its effect happening in other industries. For example, any kind of industries that relies upon having people getting together. Restaurant businesses, different kinds of dining, even retail, large retail places. They are seeing the impact. Arts and entertainment, different kind of performance exhibition, they're all being affected. So if you're talking about industries where people can just stay separate, in different places, that's fine. But if you rely on some kind of mode or format of business where people have to come together, that's being seriously affected.
So many industries where any kind of social activity or gathering is affected, involved, those are going to be affected. Right. Well, Mr. Kaplan, much of the sharing economy is driven by individuals, from Uber drivers to language instructors and personal trainers even. And especially in countries like the US, many of these workers are working paycheck to paycheck. And Uber and Lyft, for instance, with this COVID-19 outbreak, they're planning to compensate their drivers affected by this virus for up to 14 days. But whether that's enough, that's questionable. Are there any underlying weaknesses of the sharing economy or platform businesses that make workers more vulnerable to sudden shocks like this epidemic?
Yeah, it kind of hits to the nature of these businesses themselves. Because a lot of these platform companies don't have as great of a number of actual employees, they have contract workers that aren't fundamental employees. This is one way to grow a business very easily, right? You don't have a lot of employees, it's very easy to scale up. But the flip side of that is it's very easy to scale down as well. So it's very easy to see a world where I'm just going to name a company at random, Grubhub, for example, has a number of contract employees that go door to door delivering food. If people are less likely to buy food, they are less likely to need those contract employees. And it's very real. And I'm not trying to single out Grubhub. I'm just saying it's very easy to see a world where these type of economies suddenly start scaling back. These type of businesses start scaling back and saying, we just don't need as many employees these days, given the demand for our business. Now that means that makes sense from a business perspective. It's a very sound business all of a sudden. If you're that flexible and that easy, able to scale up and down, it doesn't bode very well for the people that depend upon this for a livelihood, however. So it can be a real challenge for the actual people doing the delivery, the actual people that participate in the sharing economy.
Well, that
If
really
I may
is.
add here, Mr. Kaplan made a valid point. It's in this kind of a new economy, through this kind of system, workers seem to be bearing, greater burden of having to adjust to the situation overall. But we have to be also reminded that at the end of the day, it's all business. The businesses, if this continues on for a long time, they will also have to bear a considerable cost, and sometimes some of these costs, businesses will have to go down as well. So indeed, more burden is on the shoulder of workers, but we cannot say that burden is off the shoulders of the business, especially these businesses in these vulnerable industries we just mentioned before. They seem to be facing a great challenge at this point. One minor point I want to add also is we talked about delivery side. Interesting thing in Korea so far, at least, is the delivery people engaged in delivery services. They're having a great time because Koreans somehow don't seem to mind having goods delivered to their doors in this kind of circumstances. So if we have a clear idea about what kind of disease this is and how infectious it is, and if we are quite clear about the situation where you receive delivery at your door points, things are okay. If we believe that, I think delivery business at least will continue on for some time, doing pretty good business.
Yeah, I think there actually are several. I don't want to put too much of a positive spin on things. I think there are a lot of challenges that the coronavirus are presenting beyond merely health issues, but there are a number of areas where we can see potential growth. I mean, if you think about, for example, a company like Peloton, which is disrupting the gym industry, people are a lot less likely to go to a gymnasium today because there are concerns about gathering in fixed places. Great opportunity for a company like that to expand its consumer pool. And people might be more willing to try that out if they're looking to exercise at home in the safety of their own home, but you test out that new experience, and if it's a good experience, really lean into that and gain some converts there.
Yes, I certainly have noticed that there is an expansion of more customized or any kind of services that promote sort of individual activities, containment in the home. And as you both pointed out, we are seeing a rise of some services, some delivery services even in the country. But of course, as Mr. Kaplan pointed out earlier, that some businesses are expected to experience this fallout from COVID-19. And my question goes to you, Dr. Kim. How do you think economic growth will be affected in countries where sharing platforms are heavily used and employ thousands of gig workers?
I guess platform economy side impact is something that we have to wait and see, at least on the side of Korea. The United States has a greater reliance upon that mode of economic activities. But here in Korea, I think we have to wait and see just a little bit. But as a whole, Korea is still kind of, having said that, Korea is still a largely manufacturing economy, and the service sector is growing fast. On manufacturing side, we have already suffered considerably in February because of China, even before Korea had this explosion of cases here. But now we will see greater impact because of this services sector shrinking down. As I mentioned, people just they're no longer getting together in retail places and then service places and so on. So we will see more and more of the impact growing. And as you mentioned, this kind of platform economy, the impact will be clearly shown eventually in about several weeks down the road. That's my guess.
Do you have anything to add to that, Mr. Kaplan.
Quite all right. I think we've been thinking about it. We haven't actually mentioned it. The big impact that I think a lot of these gig workers are going to face is the healthcare one, right? I mean, we're talking about a health crisis that is striking across the nation here, across the globe. And if you're an employee that's a contract worker, working hourly, you probably don't have health insurance. So the really big ramification that could present, again, down the road, we're thinking about things that might occur here. Say the outbreak gets worse, I'm worrying about here in the U.S. We have a number of people that don't have health care. What happens to those employees? To those people? I think there's a real concern that's going to arise if there is a much greater outbreak here in the States, and we're all fretting a little bit about what might occur here.
Right. In Korea's case, there seems to be a strong social consensus here about the need to protect those kind of contract-based workers here. And so several politicians have already proposed, progressive ones, of course, proposed some dramatic measures of like a basic income, different kinds of basic income here, and it's being actively discussed. I don't know whether it will be implemented or not, but on a separate note, Korean government is working on introducing supplementary budget, pretty big size as well, in order to help those lower income and workers on contract basis working arrangement. So help is coming in the way, at least on the side of Korea, as far as I understand.
Yes, perhaps this epidemic is really exposing some structural weaknesses that the sharing economy already had. So looking forward, do you think we should simply wait out the outbreak, or is an urgent course of action needed to overcome this fallout and even perhaps address the underlying shortcomings of the sharing economy? What do you think? Let's go with you first, Mr. Kaplan.
Yeah, I honestly, I do believe there are some underlying shortcomings to this economy. We saw a real challenge was presented just recently here in the States, a law that came out from California addressing specifically how platform companies treat employees. Do they have to provide health care? Do they have to treat them as actual employees? It's a law based solely in California, just based on people that are employed in California, but cuts right to the heart of this matter. How should a business treat people that work for it? Can you just have a contract worker, or must they be treated as? Are there fundamental rights that a person has because of the hours that they spend being employed here? It's a very thorny question, but it's very easy to see the point that the California lawmakers are trying to make here. We have an obligation to treat people fairly, to treat them well, and it cuts right to the heart of the platform situation. Should Uber have tens of thousands of drivers, or should Uber have tens of thousands of employees that have healthcare, which is a fundamental change to their business, a fundamentally expensive one. We were talking earlier about their ability to scale up and scale down as well, fundamental change to that flexibility. So that could have some severe ramifications if that becomes a nationwide law or even a global sort of movement.
Right, the fundamental question of protecting workers' rights. And Dr. Kim, let's wrap up this discussion with you.
Yeah, eventually, if these economies, American, U.S. economy or Korean economy, if we see our economies going towards the direction of getting more and more that of that of gig economy, I think we need a greater social consensus. If the whole point about gig economy is not imposing burden on the shoulder of companies having more of these insurance coverages, then at least society-wide, we need a consensus to come up with a social insurance coverage of these kind of people who are working on contract basis. So as the economy evolves, we need social consensus making to back it up. And in the long run, I think the social insurance is one of the ways to cover its weaknesses, I suppose.
I agree. Society-wide discussion is very much needed here in Korea and around the world as well, as we deal with these growing platform businesses. Well, that's where we'll have to end the discussion today. Jeremy Kaplan, Editor-in-Chief of Digital Trends, and Dr. Kim Byung-ju of Hankuk University of Foreign Studies, thank you for your insights.
Thank you.
This also wraps up our show today. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow with more in-depth discussions with experts around the world. We hope you join us then. Goodbye.